I feel compelled to come here because I can't fully disclose my situation to those close to me. On the 1st of December, I received the news I had been dreading. All of the tests have confirmed what I fear the most. I've been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. This means that this will be my last holiday season. Despite the devastating news, I've come to terms with my fate and made peace with it. I am content with the life I have lived, and I know that my loved ones will be taken care of after I'm gone. As a naturally private person, I have kept my medical tests and diagnosis to myself. My significant other, Jane, is still unaware. I didn't want to worry her until I had concrete answers. I decided to head home early to have a serious talk with my loved ones about my diagnosis. It wasn't something I wanted to do over the phone or through text messages. Little did I know that my life would change in more ways than one that afternoon. As I pulled up to the house, I noticed the flashy and expensive car of one of my business partners in the driveway, complete with a personalized license plate. To say this is out of the ordinary is an understatement. As I parked my car in the driveway, I immediately checked our home camera system on my phone. However, I noticed that it was in privacy mode and not recording anything. I didn't think much of it and decided to leave for my farm property. Although our camera system was primarily for safety purposes, I occasionally used it to watch wildlife or storms passing through for my personal enjoyment. I set up a second video recorder years ago to archive the footage on local storage. Unfortunately, I couldn't access this storage from my phone. As I arrived at my farm property, I immediately opened my computer to check the other server and confirm my gut feeling. There they were, my business partner and my significant other, snuggled up in the living room, drinking wine, dancing, and eventually going up to the bedroom suite. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and it only got worse when I realized that they had left the doors open. The microphone had recorded their activities even after they left the camera view. With my limited time left, I knew I needed answers, but I didn't want to deal with the drama of a confrontation and a divorce. You can call me whatever you want, but after seeing my significant other and business partner's affair on camera, all of my love and devotion for her vanished in an instant. I went through all the expected emotions, but I knew that I wasn't to blame. I knew what's important to me. I had been a loyal, romantic, and attentive partner, and now it was time to think about myself. I sat down with my lawyer and went through my will and prenup. I shared with him what was going on, and we worked on understanding the extent and duration of the affair. It was a disturbing discovery, and it made me wonder if I ever really knew the woman I had spent over 2 decades of my life with, or if something in her had changed. For now, I've decided to keep quiet about what I discovered to both my wife and our non-existent children. Instead, I'm going to put on a brave face and make it through the holidays. I want to create. In these final moments, I'm determined to create one last precious memory with my children and grandkids during the holidays. I'll put on a brave face and act as the doting father and grandfather, cherishing every moment we have left together. I want to make the most of our time and leave them with a heartwarming memory to hold on to. For those wondering about some background information, Charles is my business partner, but he's not a friend. I've always followed the principle of not mixing business with personal relationships. As a widower, I haven't remarried, and I've never married the mother of my twin children. It was her choice, and I respect that decision. When my children were 7, their mother, Sarah, married a wonderful man named Steve. Sarah and Steve never had children of their own. It wasn't until my kids were 3 that I realized I needed to step up and be the father they deserved. I had always been involved in their lives, but I knew I needed to do more. Since then, I've been dedicated to being the best father I can be. Sarah and I have co-parented well together, and I even consider Steve a friend. Sarah, Steve, and I are in our 60s now. Jane, my significant other, is almost 60, and Charles, my business partner, is in his 50s. Jane and I are both in our first marriage, which began in our 30s. I understand the need for an outlet and a release valve to cope with the difficult situation I find myself in. Venting my anger and talking through my situation with anonymous internet strangers seems like a fitting way to express myself during this trying time. I am at peace with how and when my life will conclude, and I intend to confide in Sarah and Steve so they can prepare for the aftermath and take care of any loose ends that may have been missed. It's essential to ensure that my loved ones are supported and taken care of, even when I'm no longer here. My financial situation is quite unique. I had already accumulated my wealth before I met Jane, and early on, I made the decision to place my major assets into a trust. As a result, the trust owns my home and the farm. I essentially retired in my early 30s and started working for a nonprofit. What no one knows is that I kept only about $10,000 of my salary from that nonprofit job and donated the rest back. So, my personal assets are very limited, except for my control of the trust. Jane insisted on the prenuptial agreement, mainly because she had a well-established government job with a significant pension and a substantial 6-figure income. We both kept our finances separate, and while she knows I'm comfortable, she isn't aware of the extent of the trust. Originally, she was set to inherit a 49% control of the trust, but that is no longer the case. There might be a life insurance policy on me, but it's payable to the trust. My main concern right now is how to structure the trust. The twins will inherit over 90% of it, but I need to determine who will have the tiebreaker. I also need to set up a power of attorney and inform someone about this, but for the time being, I need to focus on getting through the next few weeks. I'm uncertain about the instructions I will provide regarding my funeral and the reading of the will. The holiday season has always been a special time for our family. Sarah and I were very young when we had the twins, and although they were a surprise, we always wanted them. Now the twins are in their 40s, and we have several grandchildren who are teenagers or older. Every year, we have a week-long Christmas celebration on the farm. We all gather together, cut down a tree, decorate the house, cook meals, play games, and enjoy each other's company as a family. Sarah and Steve have been a part of this tradition since I bought the farm. However, I've made the difficult decision not to tell anyone about my fate until after the new year. I don't want to burden Steve with keeping a secret from his wife, and I want the kids and grandkids to enjoy the week without any sadness or mourning. In a few weeks, there will be plenty of time for my family to grieve and prepare for my passing. Jane's presence this week will be a small detail in the grand scheme of things. To be honest, Jane doesn't mean as much to me as the rest of my family. Regarding the financial aspect of my marriage with Jane, it's quite interesting. When we met and got married, we were both well established in our careers and wealth. We agreed early on not to disclose our entire net worth to each other at Jane's insistence. Additionally, we have a prenuptial agreement that stipulates that any property or trust that predates the marriage and any income derived from those resources are not considered marital property, again at Jane's insistence. I now provide housing with utilities for Jane and cover all her expenses, including travel, food, and fuel. Essentially, I support her financially 100%. She spends her income and wealth on herself, buying cars, clothes, personal travel, and even cosmetic surgery to maintain her outward beauty. However, her true character has shown her to be ugly on the inside. A few days after my diagnosis, I decided to retire from the nonprofit organization. Jane seemed a bit uncomfortable with this news, and I can guess why. With me being around more often, it may disrupt her lifestyle. Tomorrow will be my last day of work, and I'll be focusing on spending more time with my family. I've given my lawyer access to the camera server information from his office, and I don't know if Jane and her friends have engaged in any further activities. At this point, I don't really care. I know who I am and what my worth is, and Charles is a big step down. While he may be flashy, I prefer a low-key lifestyle. I drive a 15-year-old pickup truck, and my wardrobe consists of jeans, t-shirts, and coveralls in the winter. I know for a fact that Charles does not have anywhere near the wealth that Jane thinks he does. The trust has been growing for over 30 years, and it will provide enough resources for my great-great-grandchildren to enjoy the farm and have their education expenses covered. Jane's realization of what she has lost will be her own reckoning, but I won't be around to witness it. December was really busy. We did our normal social rounds these past few weekends, and Charles was at one of the parties. It was hard not to keep an eye on him and Jane, but I don't think I was caught. With everything being so busy and wrapping up work, I've had an easier time keeping it together. Jane hasn't expressed anything that would lead me to conclude that she knows that I know. I'm not proud of it, but I still sleep in the same bed. I've been selfish with her lately, and I feel like I'm using her, but apparently, she's been using me for at least the better part of this year. I'm not as honorable as many of you have made me out to be. I hate this small amount of deceit. But don't worry about Jane getting everything, as she won't. I want to reassure you that the trust is in good hands, as I've provided detailed instructions on how it should be managed. Thanks to your comments, I've made plans in case my health deteriorates earlier than expected or if I pass away unexpectedly. I've also made arrangements for in-home care when needed. It's important to note that Jane will not be my caregiver in the event that I become incapacitated. My lawyer will inform Sarah, Steve, and the children, and Jane will be prevented and blocked from contacting me. I've also taken the step of securing all my important documents, valuables, and other items in a safe location. Additionally, I've started writing letters to each family member, including Jane, which has been way harder to do than I thought. It's a challenging process, but it's important to me to convey my thoughts and feelings to my loved ones during this difficult time. I believe that by carefully planning and addressing these details, I can ensure that my loved ones are well taken care of and that my wishes are respected. While this is undoubtedly a tough period, I hope that my efforts will provide clarity and support for my family in the days to come. The holiday week with my family turned out to be a success, free from any drama. I'm pleased to have made it to 2023, and I want to apologize in advance if my humor about my condition offends anyone. Humor has been my way to cope, and I hope you can understand. Now that everyone has left, I have a few updates to share, but I'd like to keep the details of my week with my family private. That time is something I want to cherish. Regarding Jane, I've observed some concerning behavior that I feel compelled to share. It appears that this may have been the first time she cheated. Being around us all week seemed to take a toll on her. Her secretive behavior with her phone and frequent breaks away from the family gatherings were suspicious. The most telling incident was when she claimed to need to go to town, and one of the grandkids wanted to join her. The gymnastics she did to avoid taking the grandkid with her was quite telling. I have to admit that I've played with this situation a bit, asking why not when she didn't want the grandkid to join her. So, it seems the affair is continuing. Now that I'm retired, she's asking me about my plans for the day or week. So, I've gone ahead and told her and then asked her about her plans. Later this week, I plan to suggest that we meet up for lunch, claiming I'll be in the same area as her. It's a bit of a playful way to mess with her. As someone once said on another post, unpredictability is the cheater's worst enemy. This morning, I met with my lawyer to finalize some important decisions. I've requested him to draw up necessary documents, including my new permanent will to replace the temporary one. The papers have been signed, and I'm relieved that I won't have to make any more changes. In preparation for the worst-case scenario, I had him draw up divorce papers based on the prenup and the evidence of the affair. According to the prenup, she gets nothing but 25% of our shared assets, which mostly include housewares and furniture. I'll keep all of my liquid assets, retirement funds, and items I purchased with my own wealth. Also, if I push it, she'll be required to pay alimony. I've signed these papers and have a packet created with all our evidence of the affair. I'm holding on to it in case I want to use it. I've also sold my loan to the trust and will allow the trustees to convert it to shares in Charles's company. Speaking of the trust, I've decided how I want it managed. I'll step down to a 1% trustee, and the twins will get the majority of the trusteeship. The 4 grandkids will make up the rest, and all of the grandkids' proxies will be Sarah and Steve. As each grandchild turns 24, the kids' trusteeship will move from Sarah and Steve to the respective grandchild. If a fraction is left over, Sarah gets the extra share or vote. I've planned a meeting with the kids, Sarah, and Steve for next week. I'll be telling them everything, and they'll have to sign documents. They'll want to know why I'm doing this, and I hope to provide clarity at that time. After all is done, my personal value will be my liquid assets, personal property, and the money from the loan. In the worst-case scenario, Jane will get very little compared to the assets and value in the trust. In the next couple of weeks, I plan to disperse the few personal items I want to go to the kids and grandkids. These are already at a safe location where my lawyer has access. Some of you commented on my health, and if I wasn't clear, I am not fighting this. I'm letting nature take its course, so I have no ill side effects from any treatments. I did notice this week that I was more easily tired out, and my family noticed it too. I played it off as just the old man getting older, but I still have the cough that started it all. It was my tumors in the lung that led to all the diagnoses. I played it off as a lingering cough from a common virus that went around the world. I expect to go downhill pretty fast once other issues pop up, but by that time, everyone will know. Thank you for all your well wishes on that aspect. I'm planning to spend time with the family, and a large trip with all of their different obligations would be tough. That's why this past week was so important to me. It was the last time I could be with all of them for an extended amount of time. I'm thinking of a small trip for myself, but we'll see. My next goal is to spend a day one-on-one with each of my children and grandchildren. The letters I'm writing are not done yet. They're very difficult to write, but I'll let you all know how the meeting next week goes. Today was a momentous day on my farm. I had my lawyer, a notary, the twins, Sarah, and Steve come out to take care of everything I needed. The atmosphere was tense when they arrived and saw my lawyer and the notary. I asked them to sit and listen to me before signing the documents. After they signed the documents, I explained to them the significance of the trust in my life, why I had created it, and how it existed outside of my marriage to Jane, as we had mutually decided. I left instructions on how I wanted them to direct and use the trust. During the meeting, we discussed that the trust would be divided among the twins and grandchildren. Sarah and Steve would hold equal proxy votes for the grandkids until they reached the age of 25. Their trust in me was evident as they signed the documents and got them notarized. Once we had finished with my lawyer and the notary, copies were collated, and they were dismissed. I thanked them for coming out on a Sunday, and they were gracious as always. Returning to the dining room, which acted as our conference room, everyone was quiet. My daughter broke the silence with a series of questions. It felt like a stream of consciousness. I then started with my health, explaining my diagnosis and the fact that I'm not seeking treatment, but letting nature take its course. The family spent the next hour and a half arguing with me, trying to convince me to fight this. Sarah and Steve understood my perspective even though they might not agree entirely. The consensus was that Sarah and my daughter would come around after the initial shock and anger subsided. They wanted to know when I found out, which led to another round of anger and sadness. I explained that I wanted one more holiday week where I wasn't seen as a dead man walking, and I didn't want this diagnosis to taint their holidays for the rest of their lives. My daughter, with her detective skills, pressed me further, asking why Jane hadn't told her. I then dropped the last bomb, giving them the same account of events I shared in my first post. It was the first time I truly saw the fire of anger in my daughter's eyes. I also informed them that Jane still doesn't know that I know. The family had many questions, and we discussed many of the things you all suggested. They learned about my social media friends who had helped me through this tough time, but I didn't reveal the specifics, wanting to keep this space for myself. We've been talking off and on as a group for hours, emotions still raw. I told them I needed to go back and talk about the trust. They understand the trust's importance in protecting my wealth and their future, which is why Jane wasn't invited to this meeting. I then proceeded to share the financial details of the trust. As I went through the assets and balance sheets, the room fell silent in awe. After presenting the information, I was asked one question: why had I worked so hard during those years when I already had so much? I explained my personal philosophy on finance, something they had always taken to heart. I told them that I had lived off the trust for all these years, put them through college, made time in my life for them, and worked for a non-profit essentially for free, all thanks to the trust. I encouraged them to use this trust to do better for others, to work for something they believe in, and not just write a check for charity here and there. It was a fitting way to conclude our significant family meeting. I've achieved more than simply writing checks. I've trained others and built valuable relationships throughout my life. Today, I understand that everyone's lives around that table changed in so many ways, both good and bad, because of me. It wasn't how I had initially envisioned it, but it's done. They now know everything, and I've pleaded with them to let me deal with Jane and to avoid discussing the trust with anyone. For now, we'll maintain a status quo. When my health deteriorates further, things will naturally change, and they have all agreed to that. We spent the next few hours making a meal, talking, crying, laughing, and breaking into smaller groups. They all left about an hour ago, but I expect the twins to return. I know they'll share what's going on with their spouses, as that's just the way they are. I have a deep love for my two in-laws, and I also cherish their children very much. I acknowledge that last night was my last quiet night, and I feel a weight lifted from my shoulders, albeit replaced with another weight of worry. It's a complex mix of emotions, but I'm grateful for the honesty and understanding that was shared during our family meeting. I was taken by surprise when one of my wife's friends, Carol, paid me a visit. Carol is around the same age as Jane, and the two of them had a girls' night at her house last week. In my previous comments, you might recall that Jane came home heavily intoxicated after that night. It seems that Jane has forgotten that I introduced her to Carol, and she's been a part of our lives for a long time. Carol's parents were friends with mine. While Jane's stability has been disrupted by my unpredictability, something significant happened during last week's girls' night. Jane reached a breaking point and confided in Carol about her affair, despite Carol's attempts to stop her. Jane ended up sharing more details than necessary, which understandably angered Carol. The following day, Carol reached out to Jane, summarizing her confession. However, Jane completely denied having an affair, claimed she didn't say those things, and accused Carol of being mistaken. In response, Carol told Jane she had a week to come clean, or she would tell me herself. I had a coffee meeting with Carol, and she gave me an abbreviated account of Jane's confession. Surprisingly, I informed her that I already knew. I asked her who else was present when Jane made this confession, and Carol was the only one in the house. I requested that Carol not mention it to anyone and allow Jane to think she believes her. Carol agreed to the first part but felt uncomfortable about the second. She assured me that she would help me in any way I needed. I understand that I will need to make another apology when Carol learns about my health, but I'll deal with that another day. I've decided to confront Jane tomorrow, which is our regular date night. I plan on calmly telling her what I know, my current health condition, and how I intend to spend the rest of my life without her. I'm hoping that the public setting will keep the drama to a minimum, but whether it goes as planned or turns into a total disaster remains to be seen. Mike Tyson's quote about having a plan until you get punched in the mouth is indeed true. Plans rarely go exactly as envisioned, and mine is no exception. Nevertheless, let me take a moment to describe my plan to you. Jane and I have a weekly date night, and we usually go to the same restaurant, where we have a regular table in the back. It's a public space but away from the high-energy area near the bar. I decided that this would be the place where I would confront her. My plan was to do it after we finished dessert. Before we began, I made sure to arrange reservations for my lawyer and his wife at the same time, and I covered the cost of both parties' meals. We had a server who had been serving us for years, and I also had Carol on call to help Jane after I left. I intended to end the meal with a conversation about our relationship, and I wanted to record it. After the conversation, I would confront Jane, tell her about my diagnosis, and explain the plan for what I wanted. I would also give her a letter asking her not to contact me or my family, or come to the farm, and I would have the letter witnessed. Additionally, I planned to leave her a briefcase full of evidence, along with the divorce papers, and then get up and walk away. I expected her not to create a scene to protect her social status during the recorded conversation. Jane gushed about how great our relationship had been over the years and talked about how great we were as a team. I asked her if I had ever mistreated her, to which she replied, "Of course not." Then I asked her why she cheated on me. She kept denying it but eventually admitted to it when I revealed that I already knew. At that point, all of Jane's preparations to counter the conversation seemed to vanish, as did the color from her face. She simply asked what I wanted to say. I then explained how I came home after my meeting with my doctor, and how I saw Charles's car in our driveway. I realized that the cameras were in privacy mode, so I decided to head to the farm. I informed her of my diagnosis and my decision not to fight the disease. Despite my frustration, I pushed on, letting her know that I did not want to hear any excuses. I signed a letter and asked the server to witness it, and handed the letter to Jane. I also dismissed my lawyer and the server and gave a briefcase to Jane. It contained divorce papers that I had already signed, and I urged her to sign them and begin the divorce proceedings, as I did not anticipate surviving a contested divorce. I made it clear that I would be staying at the farm and would not be seeing her after that night. I told her that I had called Carol to help her get home. In true fashion, Jane kept her composure in public and merely uttered a quick, "Okay." However, I reminded her that I was leaving and that I was done. Afterwards, I went to the server and left her a generous tip and sought out the owner, apologizing for not giving him a heads up about the situation. As I was leaving, I spotted my son and Carol at the door. Carol passed me with a quick smile, then a concerned look for Jane. My son grabbed my truck, and his wife drove me to the farm. They both stayed with me on Friday night, but I managed to convince them to go home at midnight. While I felt a great sense of relief for having accomplished what I needed to do, I still felt a deep sense of loss. On Saturday, my family came to the farm to check on me, which made me feel a bit coddled but appreciated. However, my good day took a turn when Carol came to visit me in the afternoon. She informed me that Jane had fallen apart on Friday night and had even contacted Charles on Saturday. It seemed that Jane had finally realized she was being used by Charles and was in a bad state. Carol made it clear that Jane had not asked her to reach out to me, but a conversation with me could give Jane the strength to keep herself out of my life. Although I was reluctant at first, Carol knew how to frame her request persuasively, so I eventually agreed to have a 2-hour discussion with Jane at the farm. We would each have someone there for support, and we aimed to have a civil conversation. I made it clear to Jane during our meeting that I would not accept being blamed, minimized, or have the blame shifted onto me. The purpose of our meeting was for her to gain clarity on how to move forward. This meeting took place in the morning, and Jane chose Carol to accompany her, perhaps for damage control. I chose my daughter to make the meeting as comfortable as possible, so we wouldn't have to go through this again. I came into the meeting with a firm resolution and a clear goal of having Jane out of my life. As expected, Jane cried, apologized, and tried to minimize the affair, but I refused to accept any of it. I explained to Jane that she would have a place to live until my death, but after that, the house's fate would be up to the trustees. I also made it clear that she would not receive anything from my estate or trust. However, she has her 6-figure pension and trust, so she will be fine. Jane asked me why I wouldn't fight for us, and this question angered me. I responded with, "I just don't care about you or us anymore," which seemed to devastate her. This selfishness from cheaters infuriates me, as they often only think about themselves, even after causing so much pain and destruction. I'm done with that. My rant aside, Jane received the answer she asked for, but in hindsight, she did not truly want it. I don't desire another meeting as it distracts me from my goals. Carol and Jane left, but Carol returned a couple of hours later for a brief conversation with me. It turns out that the trustees notified Charles of their plan to convert the loan into shares of his company, and they requested a full forensic audit. My daughter, who has an MBA, is wasting no time in this regard. Jane sought comfort from Charles, realizing what I had already suspected: he was using her to see if she could buy the loan for me. Charles is now aware that I sold the loan to the trust, and Jane is no longer in my life. Additionally, Jane confided in Carol that her trust is exhausted, and she will only have income from her pension. She thought life with Charles would be more glamorous than with me, believing his net worth is greater than mine. She seems to be attracted to his flashy lifestyle, driving nice cars, dining in fancy restaurants, and flying first class, while I preferred a simpler life with an old truck and economy class flights. I'm glad that her true colors were revealed now so I could deal with her and spare my family from her. Then Carol did something unexpected that threw me off guard. She told me that since I am no longer encumbered, if I need companionship, I should give her a call. I questioned why, given my diagnosis, any woman would want to spend time with me. She replied that just because Jane is an ignorant prude and did not know what she had, it doesn't mean that any divorcee or widow wouldn't line up to spend what time I have left with me. I appreciated the sentiment but wasn't sure about complicating my life right now. Carol indicated that she'd be the first in line, and she even kissed me on the cheek before leaving. I'm sure there will be many women lining up, but I'm still contemplating it. I've left out quite a bit, but these are the highlights. I'm doing okay. It's been a roller coaster. I need a few days of peace and quiet. The social groups will soon know about the breakup of my marriage and my diagnosis, so I'll have an endless stream of people wishing me well. While I knew I couldn't delay it forever, I don't want to be treated differently. However, life is what it is, and it's time to start dinner and relax this evening. I am grateful to be alive and healthy. Every day I'm able to stay on my feet is a blessing, although my cough seems to have worsened, and I'm experiencing some discomfort. I've also noticed that I get winded more easily lately. Overall, it has been a good week. Now, as for Jane, she has taken quite a fall in her social status. Once the news got out, she was politely asked to step down from her leadership roles, and most people in her circle have judged her harshly, even accusing her of pursuing their husbands. She tried to reach out to me a few times, but I haven't responded, except through proxies, to inform her that I've said what I needed to say and know all I need to know. I don't really care about her need for closure. She knows how I feel because I told her. Here are some more details of the affair. It had been going on for at least 6 months, during which they took 3 trips together, including one where they role-played as a couple celebrating a 20-year wedding anniversary. On the last trip, they met on vacation and stayed at the same hotel. She used my house because she was comfortable there, and it was set back from the road, hidden from passers-by. She even bought herself a second car and stored it in town to swap out when she went to Charles's house to avoid anyone recognizing her car. This showed the great effort she put into the affair, solidifying my feelings about the situation and my actions. I have no regrets about my actions. Jane's drunken confession to Carol was partly due to my unpredictability, but also because as soon as the notice of my sale of Charles's loan to the trust was received, he started to distance himself from her. It appears Charles had alternative motives for his participation in the affair, and he wanted Jane's help with his loan. Jane, on the other hand, was interested in the flashy life and money he offered. Ugly people often attract each other, and perhaps we should just allow the despicable to pair up and find better partners. Reconciliation was not for me, and Charles's actions have now become apparent. My daughter is not happy with Charles's intentions and seems to be planning legal action against him. She is worried that Charles has something to hide in the company's books that may affect the employees. I hope it's nothing too severe, and she will work to ensure the company continues for their sake. Family time has been great. I attended a high school basketball game with the family this week and scheduled a poker night with old friends, my son, and my grandson. It was a wonderful experience, and I hope to have more of these family gatherings. Chores on the farm continue to bring me comfort. Knowing that this farm will stay in the family and continue to run fills me with peace. A part of me lives beyond my time here. I've also had friends and acquaintances stopping by. Someone mentioned a living wake, and I think this is what they meant. I encourage anyone to come out and see me. I enjoy spending time with these folks, even if it might be the last time. I've had a rough time recently. I ended up in the hospital after being found unconscious. Even though I have a "do not resuscitate" order, I didn't pass away, and I'm grateful for every day I'm still here. Hospitals have always been places I disliked, but with my diagnosis, I've come to despise them even more. I don't want to die there, and I'm determined to spend my remaining time on the farm, taking care of my daily chores and witnessing the beauty of the sunrise and sunset for as long as I can. I now have full-time home health care workers, which I jokingly refer to as babysitters, but I've decided not to argue with my family on this matter. I don't remember much about what happened until I woke up in the hospital. Most of my family, along with Carol, were there in the room. I was stable by then, and the doctors wanted to observe me for a day or two and run more tests. Sarah, one of my twins, and Carol stayed with me most of the time. However, there was one night when I was alone in my room, and I suddenly found Jane by my bedside. It seems she managed to pull the wife card on a nurse who wasn't aware of the instructions not to let her in. I was fatigued, but she put on an act, trying to play the devoted wife. When I realized she was holding my hand and stroking my head, I pulled away. This hurt her feelings, and she started with her apologies and explanations. I couldn't be mad at my daughter and Carol, though. They have their lives, and I understand their own challenges. Jane's behavior is simply a reflection of her desperation, and it's clear that she's grabbing onto anything to keep afloat. Thankfully, Jane left the room quietly. Although she gave me a peck on the forehead before leaving, I recoiled a bit, but I understand that avoiding a scene is the best course of action. I'm thankful for my daughter's anger and the staff's instructions against Jane's visits, even if they weren't followed. It's evident that Jane is like a drowning person, reaching out for any lifeline, but I'm no longer special in her eyes. I'm just something she can use to stay afloat. As for Charles, he remains as unpleasant as ever. His accounting department seems to have realized the change in the air, and meetings with my daughter have given her a clear picture of his financial maneuvers. While there's no evidence of criminal conduct, it's clear he's used every perk and loophole to increase his income. My daughter's plans will lead to a significant reduction in the company's value, which infuriates him. He's threatening lawsuits, but it seems his credit and reputation have already been damaged. Carol has become a more permanent presence in my life, and I don't mind her company. Maybe she's wearing me down, but for now, her companionship is a source of comfort. Although people might speculate about the nature of our relationship, there's nothing physical between us beyond sitting close together. These have been uncharted waters for me, and I'm learning to rely on others more, especially since I can no longer drive. Carol has been eager to offer her support, and her presence has had a positive impact on my life. I appreciate her help and the kindness of my family during these difficult times.
Hi everyone, you would be sad to hear about my dad's passing. It's been a challenging week as I've been reading his posts and responses. I can still hear his voice so clearly in his words. One of his last requests was to share this letter with my Reddit family. Well, if you're reading this letter, it means that my time here is at an end, as many of you had suggested. I've written letters and created videos for all my family members, but during this time, I started referring to you all as my Reddit family. It got me thinking that I needed to write one final letter to all of you. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude for your support and suggestions. This short time I've spent with you has been incredibly important to me and will continue to be important to my family long after I'm gone. You have helped me achieve my final gift to myself and my family, a last Christmas week together. Without this platform and your support, I might have had to turn to my family, which would have meant abandoning my goal. They might not see it as a gift right now, but I believe they will in the future. I cannot express how much I enjoyed making those little videos. It's another small piece of me that my family will have, all thanks to you. I wouldn't have even thought of it without your suggestions and encouragement. I have one request for all of you. My family will be going through many emotions. I understand that sharing my story here may lead to a desire for a conclusion. Please allow my family the space to grieve and keep the requests for updates to a minimum. I've asked them to give you this letter, and if they feel up to it, to provide a final update on Jane. However, that final update is up to them. I ask you all to be patient. Finally, I wish you all the best, with all the love I can provide from wherever I end up. Remember, none of us are promised tomorrow. Know yourself and be good to those around you. I hope none of you have to walk the road I had to, but if you do, I'll be there in any way I can. You are all worth so much, never let anyone tell you otherwise. I'll send as many virtual hugs as I can from wherever I am. Saying thank you at times feels inadequate, but it's the words I have right now. Thank you. I hope we meet in the beyond, just not too soon. Thank you. OP.